Welcome back to our second installment of Remember I Am, episode number 5. The response to this series last year was so incredible that my team and I have been working all year long to make this year's series even bigger and better than last year. And hundreds of you followed up on last year's series by joining my 8-week masterclass called Master Your Mind. And I receive a large volume of questions from many of you each week asking how the masterclass works, how it's structured, what you can expect to get out of it. And I thought that maybe the best way to answer your questions would simply be to give you a free sample. So we've put together a free 4-week interactive series on the 4 yogas, which is designed exactly like my 8-week masterclass. And to join this free course, simply click on the link in the description box to enroll in our Podia platform, where you can access your course materials for each week. Each of the 4 modules from this course will include a worksheet, a smartphone wallpaper with the weekly mantra, a guided meditation, and a live Q&A session every weekend. And that begins today with Raja Yoga, the path and the art of becoming silence. The purpose of traditional Raja Yoga is to still the mind through long periods of meditation and intense concentration so that one can experience the pure silence of the self. Silence is one of the most fundamental aspects of our true nature, and dissolving the influence of the mind by merging with that inner silence is the path of Raja Yoga. And this will be our practice for week number 1. Each one of these 4 yogas will sort of set the foundation for the following one. And we're just going to continue carrying that momentum into the following week's practice. But one of the main purposes of this series is to sort of give you a chance to test out each one of these 4 yogic pathways. Because any of these pathways, if taken all the way, will result in self-realization. But it's very helpful in the beginning of the journey to just choose whichever pathway feels most aligned with where you're currently at, and to just take it as far as you can. So we're going to begin by setting the foundation by practicing stillness through Raja Yoga. In the Law of One, Ra says that silence gives the seeker a foundation upon which to listen to the Creator. Ramana Maharshi also used to say that silence is a ceaseless flow of language. And whenever we think or speak, we actually weaken the power of that flow. Silence was Sri Ramana's highest teaching. And he stated that by simply sitting quietly in his presence, one could receive a direct impartation of his state of consciousness. But very few seekers are at the level of awareness to be able to simply sit quietly in the Guru's presence without their mind bubbling over with questions they need to ask. And so out of compassion for them, Sri Ramana would answer their questions and speak to them. But the only way to truly cultivate inner silence is to fall in love with it. Loving silence is the highest of spiritual virtues, because silence is the absence of the person. The ego cannot be quiet. It needs to constantly demand our attention. And so in meditation, we essentially crucify the ego on the cross of silence. This was the practice of all the Christian mystics and the saints and the sages of all Eastern religions as well. Meditation is truly the universal spiritual practice. However, as all spiritual practices do, meditation will eventually lead the meditator to a paradox. You might be able to sit down and meditate for 8 hours a day and achieve really deep states of stillness, but you can never meditate yourself out of the belief in being the meditator. As long as you are sitting down to meditate in hopes of getting some results or outcome from it, you are still perpetuating the spiritual ego. And so all that needs to be done to avoid this trap is to adopt self-inquiry as a lifestyle. Self-inquiry must be the foundation of all the yogas. Otherwise, the spiritual ego will continue to shapeshift and perpetuate itself in various forms, such as the meditator, or the seeker, or the bhakti, or the yogi, or whatever. And so as we will continue to discuss in this series, investigating the I, looking at the I through these practices is the key to liberation. So in Raja Yoga, for example, who is being silent? The more we investigate this, the more we see the answer is nobody. Again, silence is the absence of the person. Silence is. Reality is silent. And so by becoming aware of silence in meditation, we put ourselves in communication with reality. Once there was a devotee named Tatvariyar who composed a Varani, a poetic composition in Tamil, in honor of the teachings of his guru, Swarupananda. He convened an assembly of learned pundits to hear his work and assess its value as a spiritual text. The pundits raised the objection that a Varani should only be composed for a great war hero, capable of slaying 1,000 elephants in battle, and is not suitable for a sage. Tatvariyar replied, "Let us go and see my guru, and he will settle this matter for us." So they went to the guru, who was meditating under a tree during a hot summer day, and they took their seats before him. Tatvariyar told the guru of the matter for which the pundits had come to see him, and the guru, Swarupananda, sat silently. So the pundits sat there for some time, wondering when the guru would speak and address them. While waiting for the guru to speak, they fell under the power of his silence and sat together under the tree in a quiet trance, not a single thought occurring to any of them. The whole day passed and the night came, followed by the sunrise the next morning, and still no thought at all occurred to any of them. After a full day had elapsed, the guru moved his mind and the pundits regained their usual thought activity. Upon waking out of the silent samadhi they had fallen into, the pundits declared, "Slaying 1,000 elephants is nothing compared to the power of this guru to conquer the rutting elephants of the mind. Therefore, let us all compose Varanis in his honor." All of this was accomplished without a single word being spoken by the guru, but only through the transcendent power of his inner silence. When you sit down to meditate, you'll notice that there is a constant voice saying, "Am I doing it? Was I silent just now? Oh, my mind won't shut up. I'm thinking too much. Maybe I'm not advanced enough for this." This is the voice of the spiritual ego. Ramana Maharshi called it the I thought. The I thought is essentially the original thought of the mind, which weaves its way through every thought, feeling, and action which happens through the body. The mind says, "I thought that, I felt that, I did that." This is what the ego fundamentally is. It is not a person or an entity of any kind, but simply the mental activity of identifying. For example, a thought is not the ego, but the claiming of a thought as my thought is the ego. So until one catches this mental activity of claiming I this and I that constantly, no spiritual practice can lead one to true self-realization. Consciousness must expand enough to become aware of this false I. And so meditation, when done in tandem with self-inquiry, is a powerful way to accomplish this. Only the power of silence can expose the I thought from its disguises. There's a beautiful passage in the Ashtavakra Gita which highlights this point very well, which says, "Happiness belongs only to the greatly lazy person who considers even blinking the eyelashes a wearisome exertion. It is because of effort that everyone is unhappy, but nobody knows that. It is with this superior teaching that the blessed ones attain liberation." So what this passage is pointing to is the tremendous amount of effort required to remain in ego consciousness. The mental activity of claiming I this and I that consumes a tremendous amount of spiritual energy, but nobody's aware of it. We're so accustomed to identifying with everything the mind thinks and everything the body does that we're really oblivious to just how much energy this is costing us. But to the sage, the mental activity of claiming I this and I that and me, my, mine is far too exhausting to be involved with. So although the body does actions and the mind thinks thoughts, inwardly the sage is silent. Even the blinking of the eyelashes isn't being claimed by the sage. He does absolutely nothing, knowing that everything is already being accomplished by the divine power. And so we come now to our central point. In order for self-realization to take place, there must first be an inward act of discrimination that begins to happen between the false I and the true I. It must be seen that there is an I that is making tremendous effort to claim everything, to get involved with everything, to attach to all appearances, to form opinions and conclusions about everything. And there is an I that is ever shining as the pure witness, always remaining aloof and uninvolved with all activity. It is a loving awareness that allows everything to be exactly as it is, without pulling on it or pushing it away. And as you continue to meditate upon it, it becomes increasingly clear and obvious that the quiet I is the real I, the I that makes no effort and tells no stories, the I that does not change or shapeshift or appear and disappear, and truthfully, that it is the only I that actually exists. There is only the pure, ungiven knowledge, I am. And the mind simply borrows this sense of I and attaches it to objects, thoughts, feelings, memories, stories, beliefs, identities, and so forth. And so by practicing silence, an inner discrimination begins to take place between the true and the false. And by keeping quiet and remaining only as the witness, we begin to purify the I from all the false associations that the mind had laid upon it. The I am this, I am that, I want this, I want that, I need this, I need that, blah, blah, blah. The I this and the I that slowly become liberated to the pure I am, unbounded and free, and that this is our true nature and always has been. And so when we see the mind for what it truly is, we begin to transcend its influence. But the mind is very crafty and sneaky, and it wears many, many costumes. So we must be very, very still as we approach it, like a submarine sinking slowly into the deep ocean of the mind. And as we get down there, we can begin to explore and investigate the true nature of the mind. And we start to realize there's nobody there. There's just the undercurrents and subtle movements of the deep ocean of the mind, but nobody doing them. There is nobody in bondage. There is just ignorance. And ignorance is truly the mind's only weapon against you. The deeper we go into the mind, the subtler its movements become. And so we must become more and more quiet as we go inwards if we are to notice them, because there's always a deeper activity taking place. But the ego's job is to keep you transfixed at the surface level so that you don't notice what's happening beneath the surface. Everything the mind does is a kind of sleight of hand trick to say, look over here, and then it takes a quarter out of your back pocket with the other hand. And the mind has evolved for millions of years to become extremely clever at doing this. But as we cultivate more inner silence, we cultivate more inner power to see these sleight of hand tricks and to transcend them. So this will be our practice for week number 1. Just like a woman who carries a vase of water on the top of her head, walks very carefully, focusing all her attention on the vase so as not to spill the water, you want to be in a constant state of meditation upon the silent I. And so we'll begin each morning with 20 to 60 minutes of meditation. And depending on your level of ability or experience, you can start wherever you feel comfortable. But if you can't start with 60 minutes a day, then the goal is to slowly work your way up to 60 minutes by the end of the week. In these meditations, simply practice sitting silently and noticing every little movement the mind makes. You will inevitably get pulled away into thoughts, but as soon as you become aware of this, just bring your attention back to silence. Every time you do this, you are expanding your awareness. It is always a victory when you notice that the mind has pulled you into a thought, so do not be discouraged. This is one of the most difficult forms of meditation, but also one that will produce the most progress. And an important point here is that the mind may become quiet through doing this practice, but the goal of these meditations is not to achieve a quiet mind. In fact, there is no goal that we're looking to achieve in these meditations. We are simply practicing the ability to remain as the witness. And so we want to make sure that we're not in a position where we can easily fall asleep or become relaxed or tired. We want to remain highly alert, like a night watcher who's vigilantly on guard to catch enemies trying to sneak into his camp. This is the mentality to take into these meditations. And then, as often as possible throughout the day, just notice this mental activity of this false I claiming everything for itself. The I this, I that, my thought, my feeling, my action. And just notice that there's nothing you can do to stop this activity because you're not the one doing it. You can only become aware of it. But by committing to this practice, you begin to notice that this inner alertness, this night watcher, begins to discriminate between the real and the unreal, the true and the false, effortlessly and automatically, all on its own. And you continue to deepen in and abide in a natural state of effortless awareness. And finally, your mantra for this week will be, I am silence. You will put this mantra on your smartphone. You will think of it. You will meditate upon it. You will dream of it. And you will use it as your chief weapon of defense against all attacks of the mind. When the mind tries to drag you into that old story again, I am silence. When the mind tries to tell you that you're unworthy or inadequate, I am silence. When the mind tries to convince you you'll never be free, I am silence. And slowly everything will continue to wash back into this great ocean of silence within yourself. Every thought, silence. Every feeling, silence. Every action, silence. And slowly you will begin to fall in love with this pure, silent I that is just witnessing. Something so much deeper, more beautiful, and more worthy of your love and devotion and attention. What is it? Who is it? Where is it? Look within yourself this week and find out. As Rumi once said when asked by his disciple, "Revered sir, why do you speak so much about silence in your poetry?" And Rumi said, "Because the radiant one within me has never said a word."